20, I'm 83. The truth about my first child's birth was kept from me for 60 years. 6 words. That's what my daughter reads from the paper. Consent obtained from husband. Patient uninformed. The room is warm, but my hands turn cold around the blue china cup, the one with a hairline crack shaped like a river. I hear the refrigerator click off, then nothing. Read it again, I tell Ruth. She doesn't. Her thumb covers the doctor's name, and the paper shakes against her wedding ring. I can smell the lemon soap on her hands, sharp and clean, while something old wakes beneath the pale ridge low on my belly. A pulling, a heat. The body remembers what the mind was never allowed to keep. I am 23 again. No, 22. I always add a year, and I'm lying under a brown wool blanket while sleet taps the hospital window. My baby is crying somewhere beyond the curtain. My husband, Eli, stands by the door, worrying the seam of his left sleeve until the thread comes loose. A nurse says I need rest. A doctor says there was trouble. And someone asks Eli a question I never hear. For 60 years, I believe my body failed after that birth. I pray over it. I apologize for it. I watch other women carry babies into meeting, while I carry one sentence nobody has yet shown me. But Ruth has found the old record, and now I know my body didn't betray me. Someone made a choice inside it. I am 83 years old. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it keeps these stories alive. Tell me in the comments what truth was kept from you, and if you want to go further, a super chat or membership that tells me these voices are worth hearing. Now, back to what happened. In our church district, a wife didn't speak first when a man with a black bag came into the room. Her husband did. Nobody ever sat me down and said, "Sarah, your body belongs to your husband now, and the doctor will treat his word like yours." It was learned the way we learned to knead dough, by watching hands. At Sunday visiting, women lowered their voices when birth came up. At the clinic in town, the nurse looked past us toward the men. Even the forms had a little line for husband, as if his name were a second pulse. The teaching came from ordnung, from submission, from the belief that peace lived inside a clear order. God, church, husband, wife, child. I wanted peace. I did. But here is the part I didn't know until Ruth found that paper. In the winter of 1965, a doctor could write that my husband agreed to end my chance of another child, and nobody in that room thought I needed to hear it. That's the thing nobody tells you. Silence can look very tidy from the outside. It lived in smaller things too. When my cousin Miriam asked why the midwife wouldn't explain the silver tools in her case, Aunt Ada pressed 2 fingers against her lips and passed the apple butter. When a girl cried too loudly during labor, somebody always said she had a fearful spirit. We knew which women were called difficult, though no one could tell you what they'd done. Once, when I was 16, I saw a wife reach for the doctor's sleeve and ask, "What are you giving me?" Her husband cleared his throat. Once, she pulled her hand back. I remember the spoon in my own cup striking the rim because my fingers had started to shake, and Mama covered the sound by asking who needed more coffee. I almost said, "Why can't she ask?" But the words stayed behind my teeth, tasting like chicory. You learned from the look that followed a question. You learned from who stopped being invited to quilting, and by the time I carried my first baby, I had become very good at being easy. Eli and I had been married 11 months when my pains started on a Thursday morning while I was skimming cream. I remember because the calendar above the washstand still showed January, though it was February 3rd. My older sister Lena had prepared me 3 weeks before with 9 words. Breathe low, don't fight, and do what they tell you. That was all. She folded diapers while she said it, smoothing each corner with the side of her hand. I asked how I would know if something was wrong. She stared at the blue thread caught on her cuff and said, "The women will know." Eli knew less than I did. He had watched calves come breech and stitched a cut on his palm, but he didn't know what a woman's body did in birth. Neither of us knew there were questions we were allowed to ask. We thought obedience was preparation. Looking back, that may be the saddest kind of innocence. I had loved Eli first because he was gentle with frightened animals. When you're 19 and a young man kneels in mud to free a sparrow from fence wire, you notice. He used both hands, though the bird kept pecking his thumb. Later, he wrapped that thumb in a strip torn from his handkerchief and looked embarrassed when I thanked him. We married in November. No flowers, just evergreen clipped behind his father's barn and a white cake that leaned left. He wasn't a hard man. I need that said plainly. He sang while he mended harness, and when I got sick that first winter, he warmed my socks on the stove rail. He was 24. No, 25. I get that wrong because he looked younger when he was scared, and in the hospital that night, he looked younger than I'd ever seen him. The labor went through Thursday, Friday, and into the dark before Saturday. Women came and went from the house, bringing broth, towels, and the same 3 words, "You're doing fine." I wasn't. My back felt split down the middle, and each time the mantel clock struck, I counted the blows like steps toward a door. By Friday afternoon, the midwife, Esther, stopped meeting my eyes. She rubbed a yellow stain on her apron until the cloth went shiny. Eli hitched the mare, then our neighbor drove us to the hospital because the roads had turned to glass. I wore Lena's brown coat over my nightdress and one boot without a stocking. Nobody had told me what forceps were, what surgery meant, or that a doctor might ask to do something after the baby came. They told me to endure. So I did. That's the thing nobody tells you. Endurance can make danger look like duty. The hospital room had 1 green wall and 3 white ones, as if the painter had quit at supper. A lamp with a metal shade hung over the bed, throwing a hard circle across my knees. The sheet was rough with pills that caught against my palms. Outside, sleet ticked the window, and somewhere down the hall, a cartwheel squealed every 4th turn. I remember that squeal better than the nurse's face. The room smelled of rubbing alcohol, wet wool, and the ivory soap they used on my arms. Eli stood by the door in his black trousers and suspenders, still wearing mud on the heel of his right shoe. He kept pulling at the seam of his left sleeve. Over and over, the doctor, whose name was Dr. Keene, spoke in clipped bits while opening drawers. Long labor. Baby's tired. We need to move. Each phrase landed near me, never on me. I was the bed. I was the problem lying in it. Then everything narrows. Esther holds my right hand, though she uses her left to wipe my face, and I wonder why I notice that. A nurse presses something cold against my arm. Eli steps closer, then stops when the doctor looks at him. "Will she be all right?" he asks. The doctor doesn't answer at first. He asks, "You're the husband?" Eli nods. His mouth opens, but no sound comes. I try to lift my head. "What is it?" I say. Or maybe I only think I say it. No, I said it, because Esther whispered, "Save your strength." The doctor tells Eli the baby has to come now. He says there may be bleeding. He says another sentence too quietly for me to catch. Eli looks at me, then at the floor tile with the small rust-colored chip. "Do what you have to," he says. I hear those words. I don't know they will be used for more than one thing. The pain rises, huge and white, and I bite the inside of my cheek until I taste iron. Someone tells me not to push. Then someone tells me to push. A mask lowers toward my face, smelling like rubber and pennies, and I turn away because I can't breathe with it there. "Sarah," Eli says. Just my name. His hand finds my ankle under the blanket, which is a strange place to comfort a person, but it is the only part of me he can reach. The doctor says, "Now." Metal touches skin. My whole body jerks. I wanted them to stop, and I wanted the baby out, and I wanted my mother, though she'd been dead 4 years. Then there is pressure, shouting, a sound like a drawer slammed shut, and a thin cry from somewhere to my left. My daughter, Ruth. I try to turn toward her. A nurse says, "Not yet." The mask comes down again. Behind it, I hear the doctor ask Eli something. I hear, "Future pregnancies." I hear best. I do not hear the word sterilization. When I wake, the light is gray, and the sleet has stopped. My mouth feels packed with flour. Eli is sitting in the wooden chair with his chin on his chest, one hand still closed around the loose thread from his sleeve. Ruth is gone from the room. I ask where she is, and he says, "They're watching her." Then I ask what happened. He rubs both palms over his face and says, "There was bleeding, but you're safe. That's all." A nurse lifts the blanket and checks the bandage low across my belly. I see a spot of red, no larger than a dime. On the bedside table is a cup of weak tea with a skin cooling across the top. I stare at that skin because it is easier than looking at Eli. "Can I have more babies?" I ask. He looks at the window. "Not me." "We have Ruth," he says. And then he starts crying without making a sound. The plain fact is this. After Ruth was delivered, Dr. Keene tied my fallopian tubes. Neither Eli nor I understood what that meant in the full, lasting sense. The doctor told him another pregnancy might be dangerous and asked for his permission while I was drugged, frightened, and still on the table. Eli signed with the fountain pen kept at the nurse's desk. The ink blotted under the E in his name. I saw it 60 years later. No one asked me. No one explained it when I woke. The discharge paper said, "Postpartum procedure," words I couldn't read well then, and was never shown anyway. In our world, a husband protecting his wife could be treated as the same thing as a wife choosing for herself. Eli believed he had saved my life. Maybe the doctor believed that too. But I spent 22 years praying for another child after the choice had already been taken out of prayer's hands. For years, I thought the problem was weakness, punishment, or some flaw in the hidden parts of me. I didn't know there were tubes with names, eggs with a path, or a procedure meant to close that path for good. We didn't have a word for consent. We had permission, but it flowed one way. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He was scared, alone, and taught that loving me meant deciding quickly while I stayed quiet. The doctor was trained to speak to him. The nurses were trained not to question it. I was trained to be grateful when I woke. The silence wasn't one cruel act. It was a house built by many hands, each person laying down one board and calling it care. Much later, a woman at a clinic drew 2 thin lines beside a pear-shaped womb and said, "These were tied." 7 plain words. Had someone drawn that picture for me before the birth, I would at least have known what was being taken. Instead, I went home with Ruth in my arms and an empty room, waiting for children who could never come. At home, the empty room stayed empty, though for a while I kept it ready. I folded Ruth's smallest dresses into the bottom drawer and left the top 2 drawers for babies I thought were still coming. I learned to count months without letting Eli see. I would mark the first day in pencil behind the flour tin, then rub it out before Sunday. By the time Ruth was 5, I could smile at a newborn through an entire visiting day and only cry when I reached the privy behind the smokehouse. I built little tricks. I slept facing the wall when hope hurt too much. I hummed while other women spoke about being late. I kept my hands busy with mending because a needle gives pain somewhere to go. Dark little joke, I know, but I became very good at sewing tiny shirts for children who weren't mine. The district called that generosity. I called it Tuesday. At quilting, women told the truth with their eyes. Miriam sat across from me one March afternoon, pushing a red thread through a blue star, and said, "The doctor said I was done." Just that. Lena's hand stopped under the quilt frame. Esther looked toward the doorway before asking, "Did he tell you why?" Miriam shrugged once, too fast. "Samuel knows." Nobody spoke for 7 stitches. I almost said, "Eli knows too." The words rose all the way into my throat. Then Aunt Ada brought in coffee, and we shifted our knees to make room. That's when I knew. It wasn't only me. There was a look women gave one another when a choice had passed around them instead of through them. Not pity. Recognition. The community's best-selling lie was that each woman suffered alone. Miriam's story came out in pieces over 3 winters. After her 4th baby, the doctor told Samuel another birth would be unwise. He signed something in a hallway while she was being stitched and never showed it to her. She found out 6 years later when a clinic nurse asked why she hadn't written tubal ligation on her form. Miriam came home, set bread to rise, and waited until the children slept. "Did you know?" she asked Samuel. He said, "I thought they told you." 7 words. That was their whole marriage cracking open over a bowl of dough. She tried speaking to the bishop's wife, but the answer came back soft and neat. "Be thankful your life was spared." Questions were turned into ingratitude. Doubt was treated like pride. 4 months later, Miriam stopped coming to quilting. By our 3rd year of trying for another child, though there was never truly anything to try for, I had made a small altar out of silence. Every month, I washed the same white cloth by hand and hung it on the inside line, where no neighbor could see. Eli never asked why. He worked longer hours in the harness shop, and I pretended not to notice how he paused whenever Ruth asked for a brother. I loved him. I resented him. Some days those feelings sat so close together I couldn't tell which one had my hand. Once he brought home a carved wooden horse for Ruth and stood in the kitchen with snow melting off his hat brim, smiling like a boy. I wanted to forgive him for something I didn't yet know he'd done. I don't even know what to call that feeling. I only know my chest hurt when he smiled. Years passed by chores. Ruth grew tall enough to reach the pie-safe latch, then tall enough to leave home. Eli's hair went gray first at the temples, 2 pale wings above his ears. We never spoke plainly about the hospital. Once, after a neighbor announced her 7th pregnancy, he said, "Maybe one was what God meant for us." I dropped a spoon into the wash water and watched it sink beneath the suds. I wanted to ask whether God had used a fountain pen. I didn't. That was the thing nobody tells you. Silence doesn't stay quiet. It moves into your hands, your sleep, the way you stand beside the person you love. Eli died at 76 with my palm against his cheek. I was angry with him then, and I was begging him not to go. On the night before Ruth's wedding, she sat on our bed while I pinned a loose hem in her dress. She asked whether I had wanted more children. The needle stopped halfway through the cloth. "The Lord chose one," I told her, because that was the answer I had practiced for years. She touched the empty space beside her on the quilt and said, "I'm glad it was me." I laughed, then cried into the white skirt so quietly she pretended not to see. Even then, neither of us knew the Lord had been given credit for a doctor's choice. The truth found me in a county clinic waiting room when I was 79. Present tense now, because that's how it lives in me. I am sitting beneath a poster of a smiling woman holding a pink umbrella. Ruth is filling out forms because the print is too small for me. A nurse asks about past surgeries, and I say, "Only Ruth's birth." She turns the screen slightly and points to a line copied from the old hospital file, "Bilateral tubal ligation." The words mean nothing. Then she takes a paper from the printer and draws a womb with 2 narrow tubes, one on each side. She marks an X on both. "These were closed," she says. My right hand goes numb around my purse strap. The room tilts, just a little. My body knows before I do. I ask, closed when? The nurse reads the date. February 5th, 1965. Ruth makes a sound beside me, not quite a gasp. And then the 60 years between that bed and this plastic chair fold like cloth. I see Eli's loose sleeve thread. I hear the cartwheel squeal. I taste iron in my cheek. I wasn't angry at first. I was just sad, devastatingly sad, though that word still feels too grand for the way I sat there staring at my brown shoes. Sad for the girl under the wool blanket who thought pain was the price of being good. Sad for Eli, a frightened young man handed a choice he didn't understand. Sad for every prayer I sent toward a locked door. That's the thing nobody tells you. Sometimes the truth doesn't free you before it breaks your heart. Later, a counselor named Joan says the word consent. She writes it on a yellow pad in round blue letters. Consent means the person whose body is touched or changed must understand and agree. It sounds so simple that I almost laugh. I tell her, in our world, agreement wore a man's hat. She doesn't laugh, but her eyes soften. I try explaining that Eli wasn't cruel, that the doctor may have believed he was saving me, that kindness and harm can use the same hands. Joan says, both can be true. I go home and sit at my kitchen table until the evening light turns the sugar bowl orange. I grieve what could have been different. Not only another child, but one honest talk, one drawing, one question asked to my face. The outside world had a word for what happened. My old world had no place to put it. I belonged fully to neither. And still, I carry gifts from that place. I carry the sound of horses before dawn, their hooves shifting in the dark while frost silvered the pump handle. I can hear my father murmur to them as if the barn were a church. I carry bread from a wood oven, the crust split down the center, and steam warming my face when Mama broke it open. No store loaf has ever smelled like that, though I've given many a fair chance. And I carry my grandmother's hands when she prayed, knuckles wide, nails cut square, one thumb rubbing the other as she named every child in the district. Those memories are mine. I won't hand them back just because other things were taken. The harm has a name too, silence dressed as care. I can hold that sentence beside the good without crushing either one. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. I know because I swept its floors. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. I miss the bells on a winter sleigh, the weight of a wool shawl, the way neighbors appeared before you finished asking. But I no longer believe love must be quiet to be holy. These days, when a young woman asks me something hard, I answer the thing she asked. Not the safer thing, the true thing. I think of Aunt Ada passing the apple butter, and I feel tenderness for her too. She was taught the same silence and called it shelter. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken because you learned late. You are not foolish because you trusted the people who raised you. You are not cruel for loving parts of a place that caused you harm. Your memories don't have to line up neatly. Mine never did. You can miss the bread and still name the hunger. You can love a person and tell the truth about what happened beside them. And you don't owe anyone a simpler story just because your real one makes them uneasy. If you're still inside, I see how careful you have to be. If you left, I see the strange ache of missing what you escaped. If you're thinking about leaving, your questions are not sins. If you're married, and only now finding words for old hurt, you are not too late. If you recognized yourself 3 minutes ago, breathe before you decide what comes next. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this, or the moment you realized silence had been making choices for you. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer. Subscribe to Rebecca Amish Home if you want to stay for those stories, because this is where we name what was hidden without throwing away every good thing we carried out. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. I was 83 before I said this aloud. You don't have to wait that long. Your body was always yours.